Hey gang, I'm in Aurora, Illinois today, far, far western suburb of Chicago, and I'm at a very small cemetery in a residential area here. I'm next to a church called the Greater Mount Olive Church. This, back in the day, was considered what they termed a churchyard or a graveyard, today called a cemetery. But what we're going to do is we're going to stroll along here. I'm going to tell you a really, really odd tale on a couple of fronts. And I want to thank Jamie, one of our viewers, who suggested this story. Never would have found it. Of all of these gravestones here, you know, German, or when you see Irish, you usually don't see pictures on a grave. But the grave we're going to does have a picture of this young woman who was actually murdered here in this cemetery back in 1914. A really twisted tale, but the ending is really crazy. Wait till you hear the very end of the story as we'll approach her grave. What I'm going to do is something a little bit different today. Instead of narrate the story, just tell the story like I do. I was really intrigued with the article when I read it back from the day that reported on this story. So I'm going to read you the article as it was written, because it kind of gives you a flavor, kind of a feeling like going back in time. When I read it, I felt like I was back here at that time. And you have to imagine, back in 1915, 1914, what did this look like here? And what's interesting about these old cemeteries, these small ones, there are no new graves here. No one comes here other than curiosity seekers like us or historians. And it just sits here. It just sits here. So let's talk about this story. And I'm going to read to you from the True Republican, February 27th, 1915. Third Aurora woman slain. 3 helpless women killed in a year. Dogs trail madman. Women of Aurora terror-stricken over another brutal murder of a defenseless woman, apparently without cause. The third committed on the streets of this city within a year. The people of Aurora are greatly excited over the third murder, which has occurred within a year on the streets of that city. Emma Peterson, only 22 years of age and pretty, was struck down last night, dead. On the street, only a block away from the home, John Dooling, a wealthy retired grocer with whom she had made her home. The killing is attributed to a madman. Bloodhounds have been put on his trail. The murder of Emma Peterson was like that of Theresa Hollander, who was slugged to death on February 16th, 1914, in a churchyard. And by the way, that's whose grave we're going to, Theresa Hollander. And Jenny Miller, who was slugged to death on November 16th, 1914, near her home. Arrested on suspicion. An hour after the girl died in St. Joseph's Hospital, John Mason, a 60-year-old eccentric who was employed at the hospital, was arrested. He had been locked up earlier in the evening on a charge of having annoyed a young woman, and the strange death caused suspicion to be directed towards him. The girl, whose name was not ascertained by police, had complained to her father that a man had attacked her in that vicinity the night before. Father and his daughter, they went out in the night to try to trap the man. The girl walked several yards ahead of the father, and just then the man jumped out at her. She screamed, and her father ran up. He grabbed the man by the throat and overpowered him. He was taken to the police station, and the police, after questioning this man named Mason, they released him. When the sisters declared he was only an eccentric. Skull crushed by blow. Miss Peterson apparently was struck twice with terrific force. Her skull was crushed and her jaw broken. She never regained consciousness, and she died in a few minutes after she had been taken to the hospital. The strange murder, following in circumstance, the two preceded it, has struck the hearts of Aurora women with the chill of terror. Miss Peterson's body was discovered by two girls who were going home on North Lake Street in the western suburb here last night of Aurora. Police find no clue. And by the way, they spelled clue C-L-E-W back then. There was no clue, no trace of the mysterious man who had struck her down. The wounds were similar to those in the head of Miss Miller. A pipe wrench had been used. In the former case, the murderer had left behind in the instrument of his crime, though it was hoped to trace him, but all efforts to do so had failed. These three murders were very similar. The girl, well-dressed, and wore a handsome set of mink furs. The similarity between the murder and the deaths of Miss Hollander and Miss Miller has convinced the police that they were done by the same hand. The theory is firmly established that the slayer is a man who would be least suspected, a respectable man by day and a maniac by night. So that is the story that appeared in the newspaper. Now, to boil it down, really what happened here was Theresa and the other women, well, Theresa was actually murdered by an ex-boyfriend, a man that she had rebuffed, and somehow they both ended up here in this graveyard, St. Nicholas. How, I don't know. But he killed her using a grave stake. What is a grave stake? Well, a grave stake is, see if I don't see any here, but it's a stake that goes in the ground. I believe that holds, well, it could hold flowers or a sign or, you know, something else. But that's how he killed her. He like crushed her skull right here in the cemetery where she is buried. And I'm going to tell you something else. The police tried this crazy method. And when you hear this, you're just not going to believe it. And it was published in the newspaper almost like it was successful. That method that they used post-mortem on her that they thought would identify the killer. And it's a very intriguing picture that we approach now. The grave of Theresa Hollander. Mutter Vater. Hollander is a German name. Let's take a look at the picture, which survives. Many cracks in the picture, but you can see how clear it is. It's almost like we can go back in time and see her in life. But this picture was taken not long before she was killed. And look at the dress that she has on, all the way up the collar. It's just very, very interesting. Mother Maria, 1857, 19, yeah, I can't read it. I see 1859, 1932 for, it looks like Ludwig, the father, Vater. And here's Theresa's inscription right here. I didn't bring my flashlight and we're into the sun, so I cannot read it. I think it's going to be hard to make out, but here's what's crazy. Here's what's crazy. They basically took her, after she died, they took her retina, her eye, because they believe that in the lens of her retina, that just before you die, it captures the image like a projector of whatever you last saw. And they published it in the paper like it was successful. I'll read it to you, what they published. It's preposterous. But back in those days, the title of the short article says, "Image on her retina may show girl slayer." Chicago, February 25th. A photograph of the slayer of Tracy Hollander, the Aurora girl clubbed to death with a grave stake in St. Nicholas Cemetery last week, has been taken from the eye of the murdered girl, according to a statement made today by the state's attorney, W.J. Tyers. The picture was taken at the suggestion of the local occultist, who told the police that the retina would show the last object within her vision before she became unconscious. The photograph is held by the accusers of Anthony Petrus. It will be shown to the grand jury, which meets Saturday. Now, I can guarantee you there was no follow-up article to that, because we know that unless you if you guys know different, you doctors, if your retina captures the last image before you die, I wonder if they dissected her eyeball and like took her retina and put it in front of a projector. Who knows what morbid stuff they did with her body. But in those days, there was a lot of quackery and a lot of crazy stuff going on. So yeah, with that we will wish and hope that Theresa is resting in peace. And that'll do it. Rest in peace, Theresa.